Disney World. Hidden among the souvenir shops are Florida's new homeless. 500 children living in some 67 motels along this strip.
The Florida Project.
Florida Project.
The Florida Project.
The Florida Project got introduced to most of us in 2020 during the pandemic via TikTok one way or another, whether it was somebody doing a TikTok dance outside of the hotel that was featured in the movie, or some other form of turning the movie into an aesthetic.
I came back to visit one of the most iconic movie locations in Florida, and I can't lie, I'm disappointed.
I myself did not watch this movie until last year because of this. I didn't think that it was going to be an actual message since everybody just took aesthetics from it. But I knew what the core was as somebody who grew up in the hotels and motels on 192 on and off. The Florida Project is directed by Sean Baker.
So my inspiration behind this film, my co-screenwriter Chris Bragash brought this world to my attention. Families with children living in budget motels right outside of the tourist capital of the world, Orlando, Florida, and a place that we consider the happiest place on earth for children.
So that is where the Florida Project came in. The Florida Project was the original name for Disney World.
I want to say just a word about the site of our Florida Project.
The movie is fictional, but it's based off of real-life events. It follows a 6-year-old girl named Mooney and her mom as they are homeless in a hotel that is near Walt Disney World. So this movie in particular is bringing awareness to the motels and hotels along 192. It takes the viewpoint of childhood innocence during these times and tries to exemplify that through bright colors and imagery, showing how blissfully unaware children can be, which I personally related to, saying as you don't really understand what you are going through as a child, it kind of hits you later in life and you're just blissfully there when you're a kid. To get into the core message behind the Florida Project, let's go back to the 2008 recession where a majority of these issues began, especially for my family too.
2008 was a bad dream. It was a bloody year on Wall Street and a real capitulation for a system run amok.
250,000 homeowners are in danger of losing their homes.
When the 2008 recession hit, a lot of motels and hotels on 192 weren't seeing as much tourism since they were primarily focused on getting tourists in budget hotels over there for Disney World. Well, these tourists weren't coming anymore because everybody was struggling, and so they decided to do weekly and monthly rent payments for locals who couldn't afford rent. This started the hidden homeless, although they are still federally considered homeless. In 2012, 2,200 students were reported homeless in Osceola County school districts. Out of those students, 750 lived in hotels and motels, and those were only what were reported. As I know personally, my family never reported that, and schools wouldn't have known. In 2013, buses stopped at 53 hotels and motels for students that were homeless. In 2014 and 2015, Osceola County reported a huge increase in homeless students at 4,700. The latest school district count for homeless students is 3,314, and out of that, there's 756 living in hotels. And there is no way to ever have the true numbers for that or how many people are living in hotels because it is against county code for the hotels and motels to have somebody living there for a long term, for it to become a long-term residence. There's usually a 30-day maximum, and to avoid this and not raise suspicion, the hotels or motels will usually have you move a room for a day or go to another place for a day and then come back. Obviously, in Osceola County, there's a general homeless issue too, but I'm mainly focused on kids. The PIT count for Osceola County this year is only 382. Hope Partnership reported 800 people coming in for services, which is more. and that's just who came in for help. Homelessness has raised 67% in Osceola County in the last 5 years. Earning minimum wage in Florida at $14 an hour, a single person needs to work 90 hours a week to afford a one-bedroom rental at market rate. A lot of families can't afford the deposits in Osceola County. They're usually $3,000 to $4,000. Evictions make it really hard to rent anywhere in Osceola County because a lot of the places are ran by management companies. Now, there are more resources for people now than there were back when I was younger. However, the amount of resources aren't enough for the amount of homeless, and they never were. That's always been a problem. Osceola has 0 emergency beds for the homeless, so if you become homeless suddenly, you have nowhere to go right away. You either have to find somewhere to sleep, but there's a camping ban, so you have to hide somewhere, or go to the county over Orange County where there are beds, and that's if you can make it there. The development has started killing hotels and motels in Kissimmee. A lot of the more rundown, cheap ones have closed one way or another. But why does Florida Project bring up Disney? Did Disney play a role? So back in the early 2010s, mid 2010s, Disney was obviously booming. They had thousands of low-paying roles for team members that made about $9 to $12 an hour, and these team members weren't able to keep up with the rising cost of living with that wage due to it being such a high demand tourist area. And you could say, well, they choose to work there. Well, Disney needs them or somebody to work there. When Disney first acquired land, they secretly acquired a ton of it around the parks with secret names. This was to control development around their parks, which largely factored into a lack of housing and increase in pricing due to demand in the immediate area. Now, Disney has tried to mend, I guess you could say. They donated $500,000 to one charity for homeless grants. However, they are still underpaying, and in a rising economy with a housing crisis in Florida, especially Central Florida. For my family, the payment for a hotel was usually about $1,300 a month. And we were a family of 6 at times, sometimes 7, and we all stayed in one room. Whereas in a house, we would have 3 bedrooms, and it would have been around $1,200 a month in the same area. So the whole cycle of getting evicted or not having enough money for rent and then having to go to a hotel so your kids weren't on the street, but the hotel being as much as rent so you can't save up for rent, was a pretty common cycle. We were constantly being evicted on and off. So we had the ones that I can count that I remember, because it was very on and off, are 10 houses that we rented, houses, apartments, townhomes, 10 places we rented that were housing, 9 times living in hotels, and sometimes it was multiple hotels. I just can't always remember every single one for obvious reasons. We used the city bus to get to school. We used free lunches at the schools. We did qualify for that. Another thing about living in the hotels and motels, a lot of the time you don't have, especially with a family of like 6, 7 usually, you don't have room in a hotel for all of your belongings, so they would go in a storage unit. And usually if you're struggling, you don't have the money for a hotel room that's as much as rent in a storage unit, so you lose the storage unit and all your stuff. There was one time where we had just checked out from a hotel or something, and I don't know the logistics of it. We could have not paid on time or whatever the case was, but we had just left, and my dad forgot a really expensive watch of his in there that he still had from before we got evicted, and they stole it. It's not funny, but they stole it. We laugh about it now. When we weren't living in hotels, we used taxis. When taxis went out of style, we used buses to get everywhere. In and out of the hotels, the gas station workers would save us food at the end of the night to eat. When we weren't in hotels, we usually wouldn't spend money on furniture. We would go treasure hunting, where we would all the kids would be in the car, and we'd be looking both ways while my dad drove and let him know if we saw a piece of furniture or TV. The one thing I tell some people sometimes is I had closed pillows. I guess I'll share that. So in between hotels, we didn't have the money for pillows, so we would take pillowcases and put clothes in them. I was pretty young, maybe like 4. And I am trying to get interviews with other people for their experiences living in the hotels or motels, because I honestly block a lot of it out. All I can say is why it happened. I don't really remember a lot about being in the hotel rooms. I remember playing Movie Star Planet on a laptop in one, losing my dogs because we had to go to the hotel. I never told anybody at school about it. I hid it. I was pretty embarrassed about it. I was very used to it. I don't think I remember much about it because I was so used to it. It was normal. It happened since I was so young. And I have one person who said that they would talk to me, and I'm waiting on their response. Do I think Sean Baker portrayed the message correctly? Yes. However, with anything in the broad spectrum of human eyes, it will be perceived differently in multiple areas, and unfortunately, the vast majority of people perceived it as a childhood nostalgia film. And if that brings you nostalgia, just know it brought me fear for 4 years before I watched it, 4.5 years before I watched it. It shouldn't be nostalgic. It should be a message. It should be a wake-up call. It should tell you kids shouldn't be living like that. And it should make you a little bit uncomfortable. There are multiple foundations that help families on 192. Not only can you help families on 192, you can help families anywhere. This is a problem anywhere, especially tourist areas. However, if you want to specifically help families in that area, you can donate to Hope Partnership Kissimmee. They're a leading local nonprofit. They help with housing and jobs. Or there is Embrace of Celebration, which helps with weekly groceries to people in hotels and motels along 192.